I've been around the world. I've seen some pretty faces, been with some beautiful girls. After all I've witnessed, one thing still amazes me. Just like a miracle, you have to see to believe. 'Cause God bless Texas with his own hand, brought down angels from the promised land, gave them a place where they could dance. If you want to see heaven, brother, here's your chance. I've been sent to spread the message. God bless Texas.
Oh, God. That I hate that's how I decided to start the show. I had full control over it, and I chose to do that song. And I think it really encapsulates Texas and their weird, just over-the-top pride in what is generally just an okay place, right? Like, you've got giant cities, all right? Houston, like the third or fourth biggest city, like if it's not the third yet, like if it hasn't passed Chicago yet, it will soon. The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, just a huge metropolis area. San Antonio, it's a pretty cool city. Austin is Austin, you know. Waco had the Siege and the Branch Davidians, but like beyond that, like, you know, Texas barbecue, solid. All right. They do brisket really well. Dr. Pepper, if you're into that sort of thing, sure. But beyond that, I mean, like the landscape is atrocious. All right. Just flat prairie nothingness for the most part. Like the eastern side of Texas, a lot of like trees and swamp land and forest. And then the western side is just desert. It just sucks. Like, there's not a lot there. There's pockets of pretty cool places. All right. They've got mountains-ish. The Big Bend area. It's a pretty cool place. So I've seen. But you got it. It takes a while to get there. And, you know, and then there's the people. And I think it's the people that really bring it down. All right. Just what? Why with all the hats and the jeans and the boots? You guys, I'm a cowboy. Sure you are. Okay. All right. And then Cowboys fans for the football team. I don't know. I think if Texas had different people living in it, I would love it a lot more. But just a lot of doofy people that live in Texas. And we're going to talk about 5 of them today in the second edition of Tales from Texas. I love how I can just segue right from my nonsensical rambling into the show. It's a talent, all right? It's the second time we've done this. The first time, back on episode 121, was really more kind of a paranormal edition, just some paranormal stories from Texas. But now we're getting into like some things that definitely happened. All right. We're looking at the stories of Stephen Russell, Andrea Yates, George Pickering, Kenneth McDuff, and our first story will be of Marshall Ratliff.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
But first, announcements. It's probably like we're mid-March at this point, end of March. It's, you know, if you haven't followed me on social media, a couple months ago, we announced that our second child was on his way. He'll be here in mid-August, most likely, you know, all of that. I'm also in the middle of buying a house. Hopefully, hopefully by the time this episode airs, all that'll be resolved. God, what a process this has been. I know people buy and sell houses all the time. I don't know why. It's a giant pain. This has been a very stressful experience because you gotta prep your current house for sale. So like you gotta fix all the things that you were just kind of letting slide a little bit, make some little repairs here and there. That adds up pretty quick. And then you gotta like show your house. And people just make appointments. And within an hour, all your plans could just immediately change and you just got to leave for 30 minutes. And it's really inconvenient. And granted, like, to earn the equity that you have put into this house. You got to leave your house for 30 minutes here and there. Oh, goodness, what a sacrifice. I get it, right? Like, it's a dumb thing to complain about. But when you have a baby and a pregnant wife, it adds up and it gets a little bit more inconvenient each time. And so it's weird. And also just the home buying process in general is a weird thing, right? It's like, hey, here's this $500,000 piece of property. Generally, I didn't pay that much for my house, the one that I'm buying, thank God. But like median home price is around that much. Here's this $500,000 piece of property. Walk around it for 20 minutes and make the biggest decision of your life to see if you could spend the next decade or more of your life here. That's wild. That is crazy that that's how we do things, right? Like, this is the biggest purchase of your life. Walk around it for 20 minutes. See how it feels. What? Like, I need more time to make that decision. But nope. And so you just have all these people coming over to your house, walking around, judging you, giving weird looks like, what did they do that with this? What's this decorative choice about? This backyard is not great. Okay, cool your jets. I can't help that. I mean, I could have if I'd invested more, but I didn't want to. So I don't know. Chill out. Anyway, but that has been very stressful, especially dealing with people who are trying to sell their house being unreasonable about the value of their house. Like, I get it. You love your house, but it's not worth as much as you said it was. And I've got the papers to prove it. And then they're still like, nah, dog, we still want this much for it. But then your house is just going to sit on the market for another 6 months and you're going to be right back in this discussion again. So maybe quit being a dickhead about it. Anyway, those little vignettes have been brought to you by the constant landmine field that is my life right now. Anyway, let's get into our first story of Marshall Ratliff, because he loved committing crimes. Although he continued to get caught for said crimes, he never really learned his lesson. After spending time in prison for robbing a bank in Valera, Texas, Ratliff was paroled and immediately began planning another bank robbery in the town of Cisco with his brother. When his brother got arrested for a different crime, obviously he was out of the new bank robbery, so Ratliff recruited Henry Helms, Robert Hill, and just another guy who was good at cracking safes, which is, you kind of needed that in the 1920s when this story took place. As the date for their new bank robbery approached, their safe guy caught the flu and had to back out. So Hill recruited his friend, Robert Hill, one of the accomplices for this, recruited his friend Lewis Davis instead, and the group went forward with their bank robbery. On December 22nd, 1927, the group stole a car in Wichita Falls and drove down to Cisco, arriving at the bank the next morning. Ratliff, who had already been living in Cisco for some time, knew that he would likely be recognized upon entering the bank. So why would you rob a bank? Because, Cisco is one of those small Texas towns where everybody knows everybody. So why are you, idiot, robbing the bank in that town where everybody already knows you? Go to another town. Go to the next town over. This isn't difficult, but whatever. However, the boarding house where he had been staying, because he is a paroled, felon, the boarding house was low on disguises because, why would anyone have disguises at a boarding house? So instead, he stole a Santa Claus suit and decided to rob the bank dressed as Santa Claus. The three men let Ratliff out a few blocks before the bank so as not to seem suspicious about it. But that plan immediately backfired. Why? Because it was 3 days before but it's 2 days before Christmas now. So many children in downtown Cisco ran up to Ratliff as if he were the real Santa Claus. Meanwhile, it's just this dude who's on his way to go rob the bank. The kids even followed him into an alley where he was meeting up with his accomplices and then followed the entire group right into the bank. So Ratliff, he's dressed in this Santa suit. He walks up to fill out a deposit slip. And meanwhile, there's just these kids behind him. Santa, I want a brand new bicycle for Christmas. And I want a BB gun. And I want a brand new doggy to toy with and to protect the bank. Kid, shut up. I'm trying to rob this bank, okay? Meanwhile, while he's filling out the deposit slip, Henry Hill walks into the bank with a pistol and points it at the cashier. 2 other accomplices followed shortly thereafter with his own guns. So, with the cashiers distracted, Ratliff rushed through a swinging door and into the cashier's area, where he opened a drawer under the counter and grabbed a pistol. Now, around this time, this is good context here, an average of 3 Texas banks were getting robbed every day. So cashiers that worked in the bank had the authority to shoot on sight because Texas. So, and that's not a joke. None of that was a misdirection. That was just the way things were in Texas at this time. 3 banks every single day on average were getting robbed in Texas. And so rather than, I don't know, hire armed security guards or to beef up the security at the bank itself, Texas lawmakers, in the classic Texas way they do things, were just like, yeah, why don't we just give them guns? Go fight fire with fire. Give the cashiers guns. It'll obviously work. We're going to give the teachers guns later on to fight the school shooters. So let's start with the banks. Let's give them guns. And that will maybe deter all of the robberies. Well, guess what? It didn't really work. So Ratliff grabs the gun that the cashiers would normally be using in this situation. Everyone, meanwhile, that's in the bank was watching in horror as Santa Claus is just robbing this bank, ordering the cashiers to drop stacks of money and bonds into his sack that he had because he's Santa Claus. He's carrying his sack, obviously. One parent who was hoping to let her child see Santa unknowingly walked into the bank during the robbery that was taking place. Realizing what was going on, she quickly threw her child back outside and alerted police. When Ratliff had stuffed his Santa suit full of money, he and his accomplices readied to leave the bank, only to find that 3 police officers had already surrounded the building. Now, as is the case when this sort of thing happens, no one agrees on who shot first, but gunfire quickly erupted from both sides and inside the bank. Now, because it's Texas, the citizens in the area who were already packing their own heat converged on the bank as well to join in the gunfight. Anyone who didn't already have a gun ran to a nearby hardware store to grab one. The mailman, carrying a gun, shot one of the robbers, while one bullet hit a cashier's face and another grazed a bank customer's leg. Eventually, the robbers directed all of the employees and customers to the back of the bank toward the getaway car. However, most of the hostages ran away as soon as they got outside, except for 2 girls, Laverne Comer and MMA Robertson, who were 12 and 10 years old, respectively. They were used as human shields. By the time the group got into their getaway car, over 100 shots had been fired. 2 of the 3 officers that responded had been shot, including Chief G.E. Bedford, who was shot 5 times as the men peeled out of the alley. Both officers eventually died from their wounds. While it looked as though Ratliff and his men would get away with this, they quickly realized that they had forgotten to fill the car with gas before the robbery. And as they got to the edge of town, a mob had actually caught up with them and shot one of the tires on their car, giving them a flat tire. So their car is disabled. The getaway car is disabled. So they quickly got out and tried hijacking a passing Oldsmobile driven by 14-year-old Woodrow Wilson Harris, because apparently 14-year-olds could just drive wherever back then. I don't know when the licensing age got changed to 16, but it was clearly clearly after 1927, which is wild. Just a 14-year-old driving a tank around town, because that's what those cars were back in the day. They were just all metal, heavy. They're just big old tanks driving. Anyway, it's crazy. However, when they tried to drive away in this Oldsmobile, they realized that the 14-year-old had actually taken the keys with him and run off. So these guys are terrible. These guys are bad at being bank robbers. At that point, the men jumped out of that car with their hostages, leaving Lewis Davis behind, who was unconscious after having been shot in the initial gunfight, and got back into their original car, only to realize that they had now left the sack of money in the Oldsmobile. Oh, God. At this point, it was too late. The mob had already closed in on them, gotten the money back. While the mob returned roughly $13,000 in cash and $150,000 in securities to the bank, Ratliff, Helms, and Hill resumed their escape. Lewis Davis was taken to a hospital in Fort Worth, where he later died from his injuries. Meanwhile, the men were then pursued by a different mob down a dirt road on the outskirts of town. In response, Ratliff tried throwing nails out of the window to flatten the mob's tires because this thing had not gotten ridiculous enough. With the mob now closing in, though, Ratliff turned off the dirt road and drove through pastures full of cactus and small trees. Eventually, however, the brush became too thick and the men abandoned their car and hostages to continue their escape on foot. The men eventually hijacked another car, this time taking the driver as a hostage. And on the way out of town, the driver's father fired a shotgun at the car, which only ended up striking his son, that car's original driver. So now they're just causing chaos all over the place. This time, though, rather than try to get as far away as possible, Ratliff decided to return to Cisco and release his hostage before stealing another car. By now, each man was injured and hungry, and they were ultimately captured in the town of South Bend as they crossed the Brazos River. After another brief shootout in an oil field, Ratliff was shot and apprehended, still in his Santa suit, by the way, and taken to the nearby Eastland County Jail. His two other accomplices were captured a week later. Henry Helms was given the death sentence for murdering the two police officers who died at the start of the robbery and was executed on September 6, 1929. Robert Hill was given a 99-year sentence and escaped prison on 3 different occasions, though he was caught each time. He was eventually paroled in the 1940s, changed his name, and became a productive citizen before dying in 1996. Ratliff was convicted of armed robbery and given a 99-year prison sentence. 2 months later, he was sentenced to death for his role in the deaths of those 2 police officers. Ratliff appealed, but it was denied, and on the day of Helms' execution, Ratliff actually began acting mentally insane as a way to avoid execution. But that didn't work because Texas, doesn't matter if you're mentally disabled or not, they're going to kill you anyway. So he faked paralysis, which somehow fooled his jailers long enough to allow him to sneak into an office, grab a pistol, and shoot one of the jailers. The next day, nearly 2,000 people showed up at the prison demanding Ratliff's release so they could just execute him themselves, since the Texas prison system was clearly handling this situation so well. Ratliff's other jailer, Pat Kilborn, refused the demand, but was quickly overpowered by 20 men who dragged Ratliff out of the prison. The mob then tied Ratliff's hands and feet together and carried him to a vacant lot behind the local theater in Eastland that was ironically showing the play The Noose. The mob tossed rope over a cable between 2 telephone poles and tried to hang Ratliff. Unfortunately, the knot came loose and Ratliff tumbled to the ground. But this time, not wanting to drag this out any longer, the mob got a stronger rope, lifted Ratliff 15 feet up in the air where he strangled to death. Our next story is of Kenneth McDuff, who was born on March 21st, 1946 in Rosebud, Texas. Although he was considered a bully in school, McDuff only picked on smaller kids because he lacked the strength to compete against kids his own size. After losing a fight in high school, McDuff dropped out and went to work at his father's successful concrete business. But in 1964, he was arrested and convicted on 12 counts of burglary across 3 separate counties. Although he was given a 4-year prison sentence, he was paroled less than a year later. On August 6, 1966, McDuff and his new best friend, Roy Dale Green, who was also a criminal, went out looking for some of that sweet Texas poontang. They soon, I don't know why I said it like that. They soon happened upon 17-year-old Robert Brand, 16-year-old Edna Sullivan, and 15-year-old Mark Dunman hanging out at a baseball field. McDuff parked his car, walked over to the group of teenagers, threatened them with his gun, and ordered all of them to get into the trunk of his car. McDuff then drove the three out to another field where Sullivan was ordered out of the trunk and into the back seat. McDuff then fired several shots into the trunk to kill Brand and Dunman before ordering Green to wipe all of the fingerprints off the car. After driving to another location, McDuff and Green repeatedly raped Sullivan before McDuff strangled her to death with a broomstick, which that's gotta be a hard way to strangle someone. You know, you kind of want like a rope or a wire of some sort, something, you know, that can be fashioned into something that is circular, so that can go around someone's neck to then strangle them. Not a broomstick, which is just, you're just mashing their windpipe in, that's mean. That's just mean. Anyway, 2 days later, consumed with guilt, Green confessed to a friend's parents, who in turn told his mother, who then urged him to go to police. McDuff was arrested from this information a short time later. While Green was only given a 13-year sentence for his role in the murders, McDuff was given the death penalty. After McDuff's lawyer presented a mound of evidence to suggest that Green had actually done the killing, McDuff's sentence was commuted to life in prison. However, for some incredibly odd reason, the parole board thought that McDuff wasn't that bad of a guy, and despite getting extra prison time for trying to bribe the parole board, he was granted parole in 1989. Well, guess what happened, you guys? 3 whole days after his release on parole, 31-year-old Seraphia Parker was found dead in Temple, Texas. McDuff then proceeded to return to his hometown of Rosebud and threatened a black kid, which that's just a normal Tuesday in Texas. If you're black, just walking around town getting threatened by white people. McDuff was quickly caught and put back in prison, where he was then inexplicably released a year later. On October 10th, 1991, McDuff picked up a prostitute in Waco, tied her up, and drove off with the intent to kill her. However, before he could reach his location, he drove up on a police checkpoint where an officer approached his truck. And at that point, the prostitute began kicking at the front of the windshield and cracking it. Police officers saw this. They're kind of curious, like, oh, what's going on here? McDuff panics, accelerates toward the officers, nearly hitting 3 of them. Police tried to chase down McDuff, but he was able to elude them by turning off his lights and driving the wrong way down one-way streets. He then drove to a wooded area and tortured the prostitute to death. Over the next 5 months, McDuff then raped, tortured, and killed at least 5 more women across several counties in Texas, which made it difficult for law enforcement because it required different sheriff's offices to work together, which police officers clearly don't do very well. And rather than solve the actual murders, police then learned that McDuff was trafficking drugs and thought that was way worse than killing women. Duh. But by the time authorities had obtained an arrest warrant, McDuff had already fled to Kansas City, Missouri, where he had gotten a job at a trash collection company under the name Richard Fowler. On May 1st, 1992, McDuff's coworker Gary Smithy was watching America's Most Wanted when the show ran a story about McDuff. Smithy found it odd that his coworker looked a lot like the serial killer he was now seeing on television. So after talking things over with a different coworker, Smithy called the Kansas City Police Department, who then looked into it. After a brief investigation, they found that this Richard Fowler guy that worked with Smithy at the trash collection company had already been arrested for soliciting prostitutes, and that the fingerprints for Fowler and McDuff were an exact match. McDuff was then obviously arrested 3 days later. Following testimony from McDuff's accomplices, he was found guilty of 1 murder charge in Texas and was given another death penalty. He was finally executed on November 17th, 1998, and was buried at Peckerwood Hill with other inmates whose bodies went unclaimed by family. Love the name Peckerwood Hill. So great. Our next story here is of Stephen Russell, who was born in Texas on December 31st, 1957, and was immediately given up for adoption because his mother had just divorced his father and she did not want to raise a child out of wedlock because that's what makes Jesus sad, you guys. By the time Russell graduated high school, he was working for his adopted family's produce business. He was also volunteering as reserve sheriff's deputy, and he played the organ for his church. A year later, he then married Debbie Davis and had a daughter with her. But when Russell finally revealed to Debbie that he was gay, everything changed, right? Debbie quickly filed for divorce, left Russell with nothing. He soon began supporting himself by selling counterfeit Rolex watches and faking slip and fall accidents to get big insurance payouts. He was eventually arrested for fraud and was sent to prison, where he began a relationship with fellow inmate Philip Morris. On March 20th, 1998, Russell posed as a millionaire from Virginia as a way to legitimize a $75,000 loan from Nations Bank in Dallas. Bank officials rightfully raised their own suspicions on why an inmate would be receiving a loan from some nondescript millionaire in another state and alerted the authorities. In response, when they're like, "Steven, what are you up to?" he faked a heart attack in his cell and was transported to a hospital. After recovering from nothing, because he was totally fine, and returned to prison, authorities then received a medical record saying that Russell had AIDS. Now, since Russell was gay and everyone knew about his relationship with Philip Morris, no one was really that surprised. He had also spent the last 10 months starving himself to get as thin as someone who looked like they would have AIDS, right? Like, think of Matthew McConaughey in True Detective, right? His character had AIDS, and so he basically like made himself AIDS skinny. It was kind of like that. The prison responded by transferring Russell over to a nursing home, despite never running their own blood test to confirm, because if they had done so, they would have realized that Russell not only didn't have AIDS, but that he had actually written the medical record himself while he was in the hospital for his fake heart attack, and then mailed it to the prison from within the prison. So basically, he like smuggled this medical record out with him back into prison. And once he was there, he then mailed it off to the prison. So he sent the mail that just came back to the prison. It's crazy. Well, while at the nursing home where he was, supposedly recovering from AIDS or getting treatment for AIDS, a doctor called the state parole board and asked for Russell to be released into his care to undergo an experimental treatment. The problem was that the doctor was just Russell himself calling from within the nursing home. Oh, God. Just calling about his own release. It's just like, "Hello, Mr. Warden. My name is Dr. Stephen Russell. Dr. Mickey McFeelgood. And I am calling on behalf of your prisoner, Stephen Russell. And I was wondering if you would just let me, Stephen Russell, my patient, be released into my care to undergo." And it's just like, and the prison was like, "Yeah, that seems legitimate. Seems like a real call. I don't know why we would ever question it. Let's just release him." And so they did. A few weeks later, Russell then called the prison again as the same fake doctor and informed them that he had died. Instead, what had actually happened was that he had run off to Florida, where he tried making contact with Philip Morris to continue their relationship, which he didn't do a good job. And granted, it's not like he expected the Texas prison system to actually catch him, but they finally realized he wasn't dead, and they sent the U.S. Marshals to Florida, where he was arrested the following month. Russell was given a total of 144 years in prison for making Texas look stupid, and was only given 1 hour per day to shower and exercise. Despite this basically life sentence, Russell was granted parole for real this time, presumably, and was released on July 11th, 2024. By all accounts, it was legit. He didn't fake his way out this time, and he's just out living his gay little Texas life. Two more stories now. This one's kind of a bummer, but we'll end on a brighter note. Andrea Kennedy was born on July 3rd, 1964 in Houston. Despite being the class valedictorian, captain of the swim team, and an officer in the National Honor Society, Andrea struggled with bulimia, depression, and suicidal thoughts. After graduating from the University of Texas, Andrea worked as a nurse at a cancer center in Houston. In the summer of 1989, she met Rusty Yates, a NASA engineer, and got married 4 years later. Rusty quickly converted Andrea into his brand of insane evangelicalism, and the couple soon announced that they would, quote, have as many babies as nature allowed. Their first child was born in 1994, just before they relocated from a large 4-bedroom home to a small trailer in Tampa, Florida. However, by the time the couple had their third child, they had moved back to Houston, but were still living in basically what was a motorhome rather than an actual house, which is crazy. Like, a NASA engineer has got to be making bank, and a nurse, which I don't know, she probably stopped working as a nurse to take care of all these kids. But still, a NASA engineer should be making more than enough money to be able to afford a house. I don't know. Following the birth of their fourth child, Andrea's depression returned, probably because she was trying to raise 4 kids inside a cramped RV. I mean, it's like, I saw it with my wife. Like, the depression hits even when you have a house. Like, you can't help that. And so it's just got to be made so much worse when you can't get away from these 4 kids who are all super young and just into everything. Their nap times probably aren't synchronized. There's no moment of peace, even when you're trying to sleep. So she's losing her mind. And on June 16th, 1999, Rusty walked in to find Andrea shaking and chewing on her fingers. The next day, she actually tried killing herself by overdosing on pills. After a brief hospital stay, Andrea tried to kill herself again by slashing her throat and begging Rusty to just let her die as she held the knife to her neck. Instead, like, how bad are these kids? Jesus. Instead, she was taken back to the hospital and prescribed Haldol, which was this antipsychotic medication. Although the Haldol and a move into an actual house seemed to briefly help her mental condition, Andrea suffered another nervous breakdown the following month and tried to kill herself 2 more times. After yet another hospital stay, she was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis, which was nature's way of telling them to stop having kids. But guess what? Guess what it really means when you say have as many kids as nature will allow? That basically means, we're just going to let God handle it. And we're going to wait for God to because God is nature. Nature's not real. Where's all the faith in God? Well, nature is telling this woman, hey, stop having kids. Your brain can't handle it. Well, guess what? Andrea got pregnant 7 weeks later. Despite being off her Haldol and now raising 5 kids on her own while Rusty continued working, Andrea actually seemed to do well for the next 2 years. But then when her father died on March 12th, 2001, she spiraled back out of control. When she wasn't mutilating herself, she was feverishly reading her Bible. And because those were the only 2 things that she was doing, she'd even stopped taking care of the kids. She became completely incapacitated and required yet another visit to the hospital. On May 3rd, after doctors had deemed her cured and released her, Andrea became, quote, near catatonic and filled the bathtub full of water. When Rusty came home and saw what she was planning to do, he took her back to the hospital where doctors assumed that she was actually just in the process of trying to drown herself and was just like, she's fine. Like, you can't, it's hard for an adult to drown themselves in the bathtub. Just keep an eye on her. She'll be fine. This time, however, in addition to sending her back home, doctors ordered Rusty to supervise her at all hours. So that's what he did for the next 2 months. Nothing else happened. So Rusty finally started to figure that Andrea was fine and left for work on June 20th because he thought that he knew better than doctors. He's a NASA engineer, you guys. He's super smart, right? He can put space shuttles together. He obviously knows how medical science works too. Just to be sure, though, Rusty's mother, Dora, was scheduled to come by the house an hour later to check up on her. However, in that span of an hour, Andrea filled the bathtub full of water and systematically drowned all 5 of her children. She first drowned John, then Paul, then Luke, because of course they're all named after Bible characters. Once they were dead, she laid them all in her bed before grabbing Mary. Once Mary was dead, she left her floating in the tub and went to grab the final child, Noah. Noah walks in. He's like, "Ma, what's wrong with Mary?" And then he quickly realized, like, oh, no, Mary's dead. And mom is the reason why. So he starts freaking out. He tries to run away. Andrea quickly caught him, drowned him as well. Once Noah was dead, she left him in the tub and took Mary's body back to her bedroom where she laid her in John's arms. She then called police to come out to the house, but really didn't say why. Eventually, they figured out why. And so at the trial, Andrea confessed to killing her children and even explained that she waited until Rusty had left the house before she filled the bathtub because she knew that Rusty would have stopped her again. Meanwhile, Rusty is the biggest idiot on the face of this planet. He was actually holding out hope that Andrea would be found innocent so they could go back to making more babies, even suggesting surrogacy and adoption, which still horrified everyone in the courtroom. This dude had the balls to actually stand up in a courtroom and be like, "Your Honor, I hope my wife is innocent so that we can go back to replenishing our family and having more babies." Look, I get it, dude. I get it. She's crazy. I get my wife is crazy. Maybe we'll get a surrogate or we'll adopt. All right. But she's a good mom outside of the thing that she just did with the other 5 kids. We're going to let that go. All right. Jesus said, forgive and forget. But so everyone's like, everyone's mad at this dude. Even more, this dude had the balls to blame, like to put all of the blame on Andrea's psychiatrist, claiming that the psychiatrist was responsible for treating Andrea's psychosis rather than a medically untrained person like himself, wholly ignoring the fact that multiple doctors and psychiatrists gave him strict orders on what to do and what not to do. The jury quickly rejected an insanity defense and found her guilty and sentenced her to life in prison. On January 6, 2005, a Texas Court of Appeals reversed the conviction because a psychiatrist from California who had testified as a witness in the trial admitted that he gave false testimony. The psychiatrist claimed that just prior to the murders, an episode of Law and Order had aired that featured a mother drowning her children and eventually getting acquitted by reason of insanity, which is why they tried that insanity defense to begin with. In reality, no such episode existed, and it's really unclear why it took more than 3 years for anyone to figure this out. The following year, Andrea was found not guilty by reason of insanity, so they redid this insanity plea, and it worked this time. And she was committed to the North State Texas Hospital in Vernon. She later admitted that she had been thinking of killing her children for 2 years leading up to the incident because she believed that they thought she was a bad mother. She was. And that her sons weren't developing properly, which is not, maybe they weren't, but that's not a reason to kill them. All right. Like Finn, he's been pretty slow in his development. Not once have I thought, yeah, he should probably be dead. No, I have not. I feel good about that. All right. Pretty proud of myself that I haven't once been like, yeah, he's better off dead. He's not. He's a good kid. Right? He's just a little slow. Right? A little slow to get to walking and talking, and that's okay. Right? They all go at their own pace. So I've been told. It'll probably work out. Maybe by the time this episode airs, he's already doing it. I mean, he's already standing on his own. Walking's right around the corner. He's also a giant kid. Like, there's a lot of coordination that needs to take place there. And he's, takes a little bit of time. Right? It's fine. He's a good kid. Never once thought he should be dead. Unlike this hoe who killed all of her kids. Just to make sure that you're extra mad about the ending of this story, Rusty and Andrea filed for divorce in 2004. He then remarried in 2006 to Laura Arnold, who was apparently only allowed one child by nature. So, screw you, dick. That couple also divorced in 2015. Our final story here, as we wrapped up, happened in January 2015 when 27-year-old George Pickering found himself on life support at the Tomball Regional Medical Center near Houston. He had had a stroke and he was in a coma, and so he's on life support. And it's not looking good. Doctors assumed that he had no brain activity and prepared to pull the plug, and informed the organ donation center that a bushel of new organs would soon be on their way. However, Pickering's father, also named George, so George Sr., George Jr. here, he disagreed with the hospital's decision and started brainstorming alternative solutions to keep his son alive. After briefly leaving the hospital, George Sr. returned with a 9mm handgun and promised to kill every single one of the doctors and nurses attending to his son if they pulled the plug. Bold move. When George's other son got close enough to disarm his father, George Sr. drew another gun. And so they're on this, like in his son's like hospital room. His other kid disarms his father and immediately he pulls out another gun. And he says, quote, "I was in the Boy Scouts. You think I only have one gun?" Which I don't know what the connection between Boy Scouts and owning multiple guns is, but maybe they do Boy Scouts different in Texas. Either way, it worked. Like that little outburst worked because George Sr. mostly got his way and spent the next several hours in a standoff with police. And during this standoff, George Jr. actually squeezed his father's hand, which was something that a brain dead person is not supposed to be able to do. And that was enough evidence to convince the doctors that, hey, maybe they shouldn't pull the plug and that he would be okay. George Sr., who had also been drunk the entire time, obviously, was subsequently arrested and spent the rest of 2015 in jail for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. But George Pickering Jr. went on to make a full recovery. All right, Tales from Texas Part 2 in the books. Big episode today, so let's quickly recap and see what we learned.
What did we learn?
Number one, in 1927, guy dressed up as a Santa Claus and tried to rob a bank in his own hometown, and it didn't go very well. He shot a bunch of people, and then calamity ensued. Crazy story, though. It's probably one of my favorite stories. Number two, Stephen Russell was a gay man in the Texas prison system and escaped from prison basically twice by first faking a heart attack and then basically forging a medical record saying that he had AIDS. He didn't. And then faking as a doctor to get him released, and then faking as doctor again to tell the prison officials that he had died. They still caught him anyway because he couldn't get enough of his lover. And so I think there's a movie called I Love You, Philip Morris. I think that's what it is. I think Jim Carrey is in it. Someone else, another big name actor, plays one of the two guys. It's Jim Carrey and someone else playing Stephen Russell and Philip Morris. I haven't seen it, but I mean, based on this story, it's got to be pretty good. Then number three, Andrea and Rusty Yates, probably the worst parents, some of the worst parents ever. Don't say you're going to have as many babies as nature allows, and then when nature says stop, you keep going. All right? Terrible. Right? Just, oh God.
What did we learn?
Next week on Our Weird World, we are into April, which means it's another weird fun bag. It is number 17, and we're looking at 3 stories as usual. This time we're looking at Troy Leon Gregg, Khaled Mashal, and Poon Lim. What a great name. Poon Lim. What Poon get up to? We'll find out next week. I don't. I got so stupid for a second. Anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends about the show, and keep it weird.
This is a podcast.